Welcome to EPUT's Care in Conversation podcast. My name's Paul Taylor. I'm the Director for Organisational Development and Culture here at EPUT. And in this episode, we're talking about leadership, the cultural landscape of the NHS in 2026, and how it influences our work. Leadership in the context of healthcare is not just a job title, but something crucial to quality patient care and keeping our services running. Joining me today is Professor Joy Warmington, CEO of BRAP and a leading voice in equity and inclusive leadership. Joy, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Paul. Nice to be here.
So you've had a really interesting career, Joy. For those of us who don't know, can you tell us a bit about that career?
Yeah, I think one of the things about being old, Paul, is that the career history gets longer and longer and longer. So I'll give you a shortened version of a long career. So I started off in volunteering, actually, and went into youth work. And in inner city Birmingham, the Badlands, as my father used to call them, where anything that wasn't bolted down was usually stolen. I don't want to give Birmingham a bad name, but this did happen in the areas I worked in. And I did think youth work was my calling, but then I went quickly from youth work into teaching and qualified to be a teacher. And then I thought teaching was my calling. And I really enjoyed teaching. I got seduced actually to be in local government, which was definitely not my calling. So I spent, in my career, there's a blip of a year where I spend a year in local government, but it did teach me. I think that the important thing about when you do these jobs, I think, is to think about what you've learned. And I think the bit that I spent in local government taught me a lot about politics. It taught me a lot about how that electoral representative process, how it actually works in reality, which is I've always thought it stayed with me really in terms of the work I do. And then I did a couple of other things and ended up at BRAP as CEO of BRAP, which I've enjoyed now for a very long time.
And how long is a very long time, Joy?
So too long, really. So this year, I think I would have been running BRAP for 25 years, which
Wow.
I think is far too long to stay in any job. Other than the fact that BRAP has always changed, so I haven't had to. So it's been a really great, fast-paced, moving type of organisation, which has meant that you don't have time to get bored. And it's given me the opportunity to develop lots of new skills. So it's never been stale, which is why I stay, really.
And can you tell us a bit about what BRAP do today?
So BRAP is an equality and human rights charity. We work on what we would consider to be some of the most contemporary challenges, inequality challenges, intractable issues, so things that we find difficult, that are immovable, and we don't believe that they're as challenging as, well, they are as challenging as we think they are, but they're not as immovable as we think they are. So we want to work with organisations to make progress on some of these issues that we find really difficult to deal with, the things that we get stuck, both in terms of what's going on in workforce, but what's also happening within our society. So in real terms, that means working on issues like poverty, issues of racism, issues of all types of inequalities and things that we find as an organisation and as a society can be really difficult for us to deal with.
And how does that pivot to all sort of leadership and some of those structural issues that you've described?
Well, it's a really difficult thing. I think leadership is an overused word, considering this podcast is about leadership. But leaders do set the tone in their organisation. So, I mean, there's that thing that people often say, what you permit, you promote? Yeah, I always get that the wrong way around, but what you permit, you promote. So leaders, we believe, are kind of roots to enhancing performance, helping organisations to really think about what they do, how they do it. So actually one of my degrees, I have a master's in Organisational Development and Leadership, so I actually am very interested professionally in leadership, and I have thought that quite a lot of things that we do around leadership don't fit what's going on in 21st century life at the moment. So lots of things, lots of methods, lots of approaches, they were kind of developed in 60s, 70s. They're not all rubbish. I wouldn't say you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I do think there's something about the leadership challenges now that which we are presented with, which are really important to deal with. And through the lens of inequality, if we can integrate leadership skills, attitudes, behaviours, thinking with how do we actually approach problems and challenges around inequality, I think many of the things that we find the most difficult to approach, not that they will become easier, but they will become less challenging for us to deal with because we work in the muscle. And I think a lot of the times with a lot of these challenges, issues, the EDI things that we often want to label as that, they're outside of our core. So we're doing something here and then we'll say let's do a bit of EDI over there. So I'm really interested in how we integrate some of that work, because until we integrate it, I don't think we're going to get the change we want.
Agreed. And how would you describe your leadership style, Joy, as the CEO of BRAP?
Well, I came to leadership very early. So one of the things I did was I worked for my sister, and she had a company, and I was working with her in the company, and I just, family relationships, got promoted into a deputy role. And I thought leadership was all about authority. So I had an office, I had a couch, I had a sign, and then I thought, well, that's it now. Everything else will fall into place. And I learnt the hard way, really, that leadership is less about position. It's more relational. It's more about understanding people. It's more about trying to influence, to coach, to nurture, to grow, than it is about making people do things. So I would say I don't make anybody do things, although my team might say differently. But what I try and do is support people so they don't need me, so that they can grow in their own leadership and can work in ways that fulfill them. Because I think the more fulfilled people are around you, I think it's a good testament of who you are as a leader.
Can you just expand a bit more on the some of those OD methods, leadership models that you might have come across in the 60s, 70s that haven't stood the test of time?
Oh, good grief. Now you're looking at my brain. My brain is going, oh, it's too long. So there were things like they're like, I quite like, is it Denham? What's he on? I quite like him. Six Sigma. We did that Japanese method, which is
Kaizen.
Kaizen. Lots of things. I even learnt to do, what's that? Is it work in time, where you look at what people do and you quantify it, and lots of things
time
that
in motion.
That time in motion study stuff. So there were lots of things that we were exposed to, which are not necessarily enablers. They are about, I think, more about treating people as commodities. And I don't think that's where we are. I don't think that's where we are. I would like to think that's not where we are in lots of different types of occupations. I definitely don't think that's where we are in the health service.
Do you think we've fallen foul though in the NHS of that sort of commoditification, if that's the right word, of the workforce?
Let's make it a word now. I'm all for making up new words. I think we have. I think, unfortunately, we have adopted some of the worst of what I would call a surveillance culture. So the higher you are in the organisation, the more ownership you have of your time. I mean, I say that, and I'm somebody that's run by my diary from 7:30 in the morning to 7:30 at the night. But I could, if I wanted to say, I'm going to have a 2-hour lunch one day or blah blah blah. But the way that organisations usually run, the further away you are from the top, so if you think about the triangle, the bottom layers of those triangles, the more we surveil people, the more we ask them how many hours they work, we ask them to account for their time, we ask them to spend how much time they've spent with this. And I think that stuff, not only does it not reap the rewards that we think it does, but I think it doesn't give very good satisfaction to people. You know, if you're told you only need to spend 15 minutes with a patient, somebody needs 20 minutes and somebody else might need 10, but you don't have the opportunity to determine that for yourself. And there's lots of other studies out there that link autonomy to well-being. So the more autonomy you have over your life, the better you feel about yourself, your job, what you do, your purpose. And we are in a purpose-driven organisation, a purpose-driven industry in the health sector. And so I think that giving people that, helping people to achieve their purpose is really what we should be about.
Thanks, Joy. So there's something there about the both purposefulness of work and how people have the freedom of choice and how they're led. So if we think about the work that we've been undertaking across EPUT now with the King's Fund and colleagues in BRAP as well, can you just tell us a bit more about what you've been up to since last autumn with us?
Good question. Well, what we've been trying to do is to really hear from people about their experiences of EPUT and to support them to think more critically then about, given those experiences, what might EPUT need to do next. So we're not kind of swooping in and saying, we've had a look at you, we've lifted up the hood, we think you need to do X, Y and Z. So we've been trying to work with people to help to formulate responses that are in line with the culture and the experiences of the everyday. So that's involved, some focus group conversations, but also working consistently with a number of people within EPUT to ask some questions about, now this is happening, what recommendations would what would help you to do better? If we tested this out, what would this mean? So inquiring, using other people's brains instead of our own, really trying to support people to have some input into the design of something that they want for the future.
And what's been your experience of working with colleagues across EPUT so far?
Mixed, actually. I mean, not the colleagues, but they have mixed experiences, I think. So there's a lot of energy for EPUT. People feel very passionate about patients and about the care, and very supportive of their colleagues, actually. I think it would be wrong for me to say that EPUT was unique here, because we work in lots of NHS organisations and lots of other public sector organisations where people complain about drowning under bureaucracy, and I think that's a constant challenge, really. I think EPUT's size, which is not necessarily unique, because lots of organisations have lots of places that they locate their services in, and I think technology has played a part in making connections. But I feel that one of the things that people talk about more at EPUT is the lack of relationship, that they find it really difficult to connect with each other because of distance, because of the busyness of the organisation. There's good work happening, so it's really clear there's some good things happening, and people do care and feel very compelled to be here. It's hard to get a pen, a piece of paper, a chair replaced.
Small things
that would make a big difference. Yeah, absolutely.
And you undertook a bit of a deep dive in North Essex at the Lakes, which is sort of inpatient setting, and West Essex, more of a community space. And also some time then with our senior leadership group as well, which I know they found really helpful. what sort of three takeaways that you had from those groups?
Well, I haven't read the briefs on these because I did a bit of the leadership. I didn't do the lakes and I didn't do the rest. So you need to talk to Geos about this in order to get the podcast, in order to get the kind of hot off the press thing. I think there's some similar themes. I think there's a theme about bureaucracy. There's a big theme about not feeling heard, not feeling connected into the organisation. And I think there's a theme about pace and busyness. There seems to be a multitude of different things happening all at the same time. And I know that is traditional NHS culture, but I think the weight of things that people are expected to go to and to contribute to is very crushing at the moment. Yeah.
And that's really interesting. So the sort of the busyness culture that lots of NHS trusts, face multiple competing priorities that don't necessarily connect. So I don't think EPUT, as you say, is alone in that. But what role does leadership have in creating that opportunity?
I think leadership both creates it and can stop it. And I mean, I sit on the board of a trust. This is my second term, and I worry sometimes. Often what leadership does, and I know we do it in the board a little bit, is we try and seek assurance. We try and figure out, what's being done, how well it's been done. And if you're not careful, you can do things like you can go, right, I need a deep dive into X, Y, and Z. Can you get me this data, and can you divide it by 5? And then once you divide it by 5, can you times it by 100? You can, for very, very good reasons, you can try in your role to support the organisation by challenging individuals for bits and pieces of information, which create in and of themselves a lot more work within the organisation, which then eats up very little, what is very little capacity. And I think one of the things that we've been asking ourselves as a board is, do we need this? Why do we need this? What's the reason for this information? What will that mean? Because what we might think is, a little bit of information. Can you give us the last 3 years worth of this? It's time, it's energy. So I think that leaders have this opportunity. If I think about that analogy of, this wall with a hole in, you could put your finger in that hole. You could actually say, no more. We will, we're going to give you a bit of space. But I think it's hard in the NHS. I mean, people think you're on the top of a board, you're top of the tree when you're on a board. And then you get something come through from NHS England, and you think, huh? And then you go, and then something else happens. So you're just thinking, how are we supposed to do all of this stuff? How are we supposed to lead when we don't appear to have as much control to lead in the way that we want to lead? And I think that is the leadership challenge. It's how do you exercise your leadership? How do you pull back on some of that? How do you not just do the stuff? And how can you have a bit of courage? Because I don't know whether people do say no, but I often say, why no? Do we have to? Because I think those questions are quite important questions.
I think they'll resonate with a lot of people listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
And boundaries and control come in a lot to the leadership tension.
Yeah.
What's the one time that you can remember where you've said no and it's been really effective, and how did you do it?
Well, on the board the other day, I said something like, okay, they're wanting us to do X, and what would happen if we didn't? Why do we have to? How can we keep doing this? What will be the consequences? What would happen if we said no? to NHS England, there was absolute total silence, you know.
It goes back to your question, your insight earlier about asking the question of why, and back to the purposefulness of, you know, the human condition. You know, we need to have purposefulness and answer that question of why before we then can engage with meaningful activity. And it sounds like at every level of the organisation, even at the board level, if you're not asking those searching questions, you can get drowned into the latest ask of NHS England or other regulatory body.
I think we go for speed and execution at our peril, because we can often join something up, and what I find is that something else comes over the hill and you think, didn't we do this already? And it's the same thing in a different way, or, you know. And so I think that one of the roles leaders can play is just to stop. We keep saying we don't have enough thinking time, but if we could spend more time thinking, I think it would make the doing much more productive. And it's really challenging out there. I mean, I may have told you I'm in the process of qualifying to be a psychotherapist. And so I've been in and out of mental health hospitals, institutions for a while now, and that's what made me think I really wanted to do something in this area. But it's so challenging. I mean, people are so very unwell that you kind of need your staff, you need people who are supporting them to be as well as they can be, because they're dealing with people who are so unwell and so challenging. So I do think that there's sort of two halves of the same coin. The more you can support people to have energy and appetite for what is really challenging work, the better the work will be.
And it's become a very popular term in the NHS, psychological safety. What does the psychological safety mean to you?
I don't like it. It's a buzzword. What it means sometimes is some people are safe and other people aren't. Because I don't think we think about the application of that word for everyone. I think that, it goes back to that hierarchy again. You know, some people are able to get ongoing supervision and support. Some people are faced with challenging issues and can sit in the manager's office and talk about it and feel a lot more supported. But then there are others who are working on the front line that don't get any of that. So I think it's an uneven application of what is a opportunity to think about how we can support one each other. And it doesn't mean that you can't, you're not going to say anything horrible to people, but it means that you have an effective working relationship with others and with the organisation that does its best to avoid traumatising you over and over and over again.
There's something there which you said about the sort of individualism of how psychological safety works. So some people feel psychologically safe, but then others might not. If I relate that to leadership programs that we've probably all been on at some point, whether that's NHS, local government or other, do you think leadership programs today are equipping teams and organisations to be the best they can be, or are they equipping individuals to be the best they can be? Or am I leading you into a binary answer?
Well, I think some are. I think organisations do send people on leadership programs in the hope that they come back as better leaders, but they often come back into the context that they left, which means that you can't always exercise the best of what it is that you've been told, informed, tested out in your course. And I think that is a challenge. It's does the environment nurture good leadership? Because leadership is less about the course, it's more about how you are as an individual in working with people, in delivering what it is that you have to deliver. And some people I know have been on leadership courses and become really frustrated because they get very inspired, they have all of these ideas and aspirations about what it is they can do to affect change for the better in their organisational context, and then when they get back into the organisation they're like, I'm stuck. I know all of this stuff, but I can't see a way of making it happen.
So Joy, how do we, going from the cultural review, of which we've got a board seminar today, which I'm really looking forward to, go from there into something quite different with the organisation and not just the individuals who will go through some leadership intervention, shall we say, in the future with yourselves and the King's Fund? What can we do differently that moves from that individualism to the systemic issues that people face when they come back from a leadership programme?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if there's a one answer, but I think one of the things that I often say, because I coach people in leadership positions as well, is that if you want things to be different, then you have to start with yourself. I think that one of the things that leaders can do is they can point the finger. They can say the organisation needs to change. They are the organisation. And there's something about how people show up in the change that they expect to see in others. So I think I'd be very much looking at myself in EPUT. I would be thinking, okay, how am I taking the results of this cultural review into my own leadership, into my teams, into what I do? How will I show up tomorrow in a way that says, oh, I've ingested the recommendations and this is what it looks like for me? Because unless you can do that, not you personally, but unless the organisation can do that and be consistent about it, because that's the other issue. Things are going to it takes a while to change culture. I mean, when I first came into BRAP, we had no culture of team meetings and learning days and all the rest of it, and it took me ages. I used to set team meetings up, nobody'd come, and I'd be like, okay, I'm in charge, why isn't anybody here? And it took me ages to get people into the habit and the practice of recognising the importance of those things. So it is a habit and practice. It's like doing breakfast every morning, or doing a bit of exercise. You kind of wish the empty calories would work, but they don't. You actually have to have routine, regularity, all of the boring things that that you wish wasn't going to be the case, but they are the case. And asking yourself that question in the morning, okay, culture review said this, I want the organisation to be like this, what's my role in doing that? Asking yourself that question every morning and making different decisions, creating different types of relationships, having different types of conversations, making space for things that are important, like relational leadership, like the some of the things that people really want, like a chair to sit on, or I don't know. Yeah. So really trying to think, what's our role? What's my part in doing this?
And what habits have you got, Joy, that you have stood the test of time and created success for yourself and BRAP?
Whoa. Not good ones, actually. So one of the things I suppose people would say about me is I'm a tiny bit of a perfectionist. That has been good in the way, because it's kept the organisation and the the reputation of the organisation high. And we don't advertise. People kind of come and want to work with us because we're only as good as the last thing we did. So I think there's a kind of cause for BRAP. I mean, the people we've had working with the organisation have worked usually in the organisation for a while, and that's because they have a lot of autonomy. So I don't tell people what to do. I enable them to do it. Occasionally I do, but most of the time most of the people I work with are self-starters, they're computer finishers, they know what to do. There's a great sense of team, which I think is really important, that people feel connected, and that's in EPUT as well. In pockets, people have talked about good teamwork, good colleagues, good relationships, and a high energy for what we do, so a real belief that what we do is important. And I think if you can enable people to fulfil that belief, no matter where you are, I think it's a real recipe for a really successful organisation.
It feels like BRAP's got a really strong sense of why and purpose behind it, which creates that real belief system of, we can change things, we can do the right thing. Okay, Joy, we're going to close this episode out with some quick fire questions.
Oh my God, I've forgotten about these.
And a few more questions and things for our staff to take away and think about. So, describe an inclusive NHS leader in 3 words.
I did think about this actually, and I've forgotten what I said. I think I said they've got to be curious, challenging, and connected to their own humanity, which I know isn't 3 words, but I feel without some curiosity, why is this happening? Why is not happening here? And you've got to challenge it, and you've got to be able to treat everyone as a human being. So there's something about, we lose our humanity in some of this work. We see people as widgets or as,
a commodity. So curiosity, challenge, and connectivity.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Second question is, what is the best piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
If you look back and there's no one following you, ask yourself a question about your leadership. So to lead, you need followership. You need people behind you, and I think that's a great sense of your own leadership.
What kind of followership?
I think people who can see themselves in your shoes. I mean, often, knowing people can do some things without me, I think is a good testament of my leadership. That I'm not needed. Things happen without me being there, without me being in the driving seat. So I think it's a testament to your leadership that people can do things and make things happen without you.
Superb. This is the last question. So, what is one practical leadership tip an EPUT staff member can implement on their shift today?
I think a lot of EPUT staff are already implementing this, which is to be entrepreneurial, to make things happen. I see that actually as one of the things that's been really good about EPUT, that despite everything, people are still making things happen for patients.
Yeah, staff are finding a way, navigating through the bureaucracy somehow or other, and still getting stuff done.
Yeah, there's a great entrepreneurial culture here. Yeah.
Thank you, Joy. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I can't wait to see the outcomes from the programme. How can staff find out more and get involved with this amazing work?
I'm hoping that we will be promoting it. I'm hoping that, I know that, not everyone's connected to the intranet and not everyone's got a computer, but I think maybe let's think about different ways in which we can promote it and make it happen and make things more accessible. Yeah,
make it real for people, so it feels like there's a movement, a social movement that's going on, because there's lots of cultural reviews that happen across NHS trusts, and I think the key thing for us is about so what and the next steps we take. Joy, thank you so much. It's been fantastic talking with you. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you all for listening to this episode of Care in the Conversation podcast. If you have any suggestions or questions for us, please do get in touch. And I look forward to doing the next podcast with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.